I'm Marty Stouffer, and this is Wyoming. Wow, the Tetons must be our most beautiful mountain range. In fact, Wyoming is a state of mosts. Excluding Alaska, Wyoming has more wildlife, both in sheer numbers and in diversity, than any other state. Wyoming has the most bighorn sheep, the most Shiras moose, the most sage grouse, the most pronghorns, and the most black-footed ferrets. It's also the state of the lower 48 with the most grizzlies. And it has the most mineral resources. Wyoming is called the Equality State, so it's appropriate that residents work hard to seek a balance with their wildlife. Come along with me to see the natural abundance that still abounds in wild Wyoming.
Winter in Wyoming. Just a thought sends shivers up my spine. Temperatures can plunge to 50 below and stall there for weeks on end. Despite the bitter cold, the thermally heated waters of Jackson Hole and Yellowstone stay open. Coyotes prowl the snowfields and river margins looking for their next meal. Trumpeter swans, insulated by 2 inches of down and feathers, feed year-round in the hot springs. An opportunistic hunter, the coyote checks out the health of the wildlife in its 50-square-mile home range. On occasion, an immature, injured, or careless trumpeter can fall prey to this clever predator. At over 35 pounds, trumpeters are the largest waterfowl species on Earth, outweighing most coyotes. trumpeter's 8-foot wingspan propels it to safety. Traditionally, these big birds have had far less to fear from coyotes than from humans, who nearly hunted them out of existence. Once numbering a scant 62 birds, over 300 trumpeters now concentrate in northwest Wyoming. By contrast, mule deer thrive in nearly every Wyoming habitat. Where their ranges overlap, white-tailed bucks will breed mule deer does, but not the reverse. This phenomenon could lead to the eventual demise of the mule deer. For some species, like deer and elk, winter is the biggest threat to survival. However, winter-killed elk means life for the magpie and the coyote. A primary factor limiting elk populations in Wyoming is the scarcity of winter range. To the southeast of Yellowstone and the Tetons, the craggy peaks of the Wind River Mountains rise from the surrounding countryside. The range contains the largest herd of bighorn sheep in Wyoming, including 1,600 head on the slopes of Whiskey Basin. These once numerous herd animals were slaughtered during the settling of the West. Now, wildlife field crews are reintroducing them to other parts of the state, including, ironically, the Bighorn Mountains. Wyoming ranks second only to Nevada in the number of wild horses that graze its vast open country. Wild horses originated in North America and migrated across the Bering Land Bridge to Asia. They became extinct on this continent during the last ice age, but were reintroduced into Mexico by the conquistadors. Some of these Spanish horses were turned loose or escaped and migrated north. Perhaps 2 million roamed the range at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, only 4,000 Mustangs are found in all of Wyoming. They compete with domestic livestock for grazing, and a debate centers around government roundups. The roundups may keep herd numbers too low to ensure genetic strength and ultimate survival. Wild animals in Wyoming must also compete with an enormous fossil fuels industry, a condition one conservationist calls a wealth of wildlife in conflict with cash. Wyoming has been dubbed America's fuel pump, raking in mega millions each year from the sale of energy to other parts of the country. The environmental price has been devastating. A web of roads link oil and gas pump jacks, causing tons of earth to erode. The state's air and water has been fouled. Ironic, considering that the population of the state has been steadily declining. Wyoming also ranks number 1 in the production of coal. "25% of the nation's reserves are buried under the Wyoming Prairie. 1 trillion tons of coal. Wyoming coal drives the massive Jim Bridger power plant and other energy facilities across the country. Sulfur dioxide discharge from plants like these significantly contributes to global warming. Yet, the demand for electricity grows. Energy extraction and environmental protection are more often than not at odds. The very basins which contain vast energy reserves also provide habitat for a wealth of wildlife. In Wyoming, more pronghorn range over the rolling grasslands than in all other states combined. Sage grouse gather on traditional booming grounds, called leks, where the cocks display for the attention of the hens. These largest members of the grouse family are found in every county in the state, feeding on sage, their primary food. However, grouse numbers continue to decline due to the overgrazing of sagebrush habitats. Despite such problems, breathtaking beauty remains. Summer in Wyoming is a personal favorite of mine. In northwest Wyoming, Shiras moose are common, especially in riparian habitat around lakes and rivers. Calves stay with their protective mothers for a full year, and even though they're smaller than their Alaskan counterparts, Shiras moose are still imposing animals. With their long legs and closable nose flaps, moose are ideally suited for foraging on sodium-rich aquatic vegetation. They can submerge for up to 4 minutes and swim for miles. I've come to the Yellowstone area every summer for 25 years, not only to admire the moose, but also to enjoy the rich diversity of life in Wyoming.
Slow and easy. Oh, Maggie, hold. Oh, kind of deep. Good girl. Good girl. Oh, girl. Oh, girl. Good girl. Good girl, Maggie.
"80,000 elk live in Wyoming's forests, but these 1,000-pound bulls have chosen an open mountain meadow where a breeze keeps persistent flies away. I think bull elk are especially elegant in their summer velvet.
Hold it. Oh, Buck. Oh. It's okay, buddy. They're not gonna hurt you. Let's go. Come on, Maggie.
Bulls and cows go their separate ways for a major part of the year. Small bachelor herds are a common sight. My journey takes me through spectacular country. In the distance, I can see the rugged tundra home of the legendary Grizzly. cubs, like this one from last season, may stay with the sow for 2 or 3 years, then travel with their litter mate for another few years. Baby bears are closely guarded by their cautious mother, who has her paws full keeping track of the playful youngsters. Mother bears are remarkably bonded to their cubs and will defend them even to the death. Especially threatening are big male grizzlies, which often attack and kill little bears. If the babies survive, they will increase their birth weight almost 1,000-fold before reaching the size of their mother. Grizzlies make the most of the short summer. Plants, berries, insects, and mammals like ground squirrels tempt their omnivorous palate. Often consuming 30,000 calories a day, 10 times that of a human, a grizzly can gain 3 to 6 pounds of fat in a 24-hour period. Another omnivore, the raven, is common in rugged western landscapes, which it shares with red squirrels. Several inquisitive baby squirrels are exploring outside their nest for the first time. The ravens watch, sensing that a meal of reckless little red squirrel may be at hand. The reasoning power and intelligence of the 2-foot-tall birds may equal that of a dog. Prudently, the tiny squirrels retreat to the safety of their nest hole. Nearby, a cow elk tends her newborn. The calf will lose its spotted baby coat when the aspen begin to drop their leaves. But autumn seems a long way off, with the forest now clinging to the wonders of summer. What must the West have been like when the soft footfalls of moccasined feet were the only traces of man? What must the broad Wyoming prairie have looked like when millions of bison roamed, and immense prairie dog towns still housed bandit-faced, black-pawed marauders. The rarest mammal in North America, the black-footed ferret, was believed extinct in the 1970s. Then, unexpectedly, miraculously, in 1981, a Wyoming rancher brought in a dead weasel to a taxidermist, who identified the weasel as a black-footed ferret. Once they lived throughout the Great Plains, but when the prairie dog, their main food base, was eradicated, so were they. Then, southwest of Cody, a population of 100 ferrets was found. Soon after, an outbreak of distemper reduced that number to a mere 18. Fearing the species would be lost, wildlife officials stepped in. In 1987, they trapped all 18 ferrets. 5 years later, as a result of a remarkable captive breeding program, black-footed ferret numbers had grown to over 400. A formal reintroduction ceremony celebrated the release of 49 juvenile ferrets. Four-month-old adolescents were selected because adults become too conditioned to captivity. The young ferrets were placed in outdoor holding cages near prairie dog towns. Badgers are aggressive predators of black-footed ferrets, so the release cages were mounted on stilts. Prior to their arrival at the release site, the ferrets went through wildlife boot camp. They were exposed to muzzled dogs and a remote-controlled stuffed owl. They even encountered a robo-badger mounted on a toy truck. During the weeks that followed, attendants came to check on them and clean their cages. The caretakers brought water and a diet of fresh prairie dog. A plastic tube from the nest box to the cage was left open, but the conduit to the ground was sealed for the first 10 days. The tubing simulated the tunnels in prairie dog burrows. On the 10th night, the conduit onto the ground was opened. Attendants continued to put food in the cages until the ferrets failed to return for 5 successive nights. The goal was for 10% of the ferrets to survive. But could captive-born ferrets make it on their own? Could they possibly reproduce and reestablish their species? The site of the experimental release was Shirley Basin in the Medicine Bow country, with over 200 miles of prairie dog towns. U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologists manned remote tracking stations where the movements of 36 collared ferrets were recorded. Radio telemetry revealed that most juveniles left their cages never to return. The majority remained close to their release site. However, one traveled 13 miles from the core area. Then, the signals died out. The following spring, ferrets were observed, alive, in the release area. Since their release, 5 deaths have been attributed to coyotes, and at least one to the ferret's cousin, the badger. Like miniature bulldozers, badgers dig for prairie dogs. They will just as readily kill a ferret. but badgers are as vital to the complex and beautiful prairie ecosystem as the impish and charming black-footed ferret. In the summer of 1992, ecstatic biologists observed a female ferret with 2 young in Shirley Basin. This historic event marks the first captive-raised mammal to survive and reproduce in the wild in North America. The ferrets have come home to Wyoming, where it's still possible to dream of the Wild West and to live that dream, at least for a few weeks each summer. Regardless of where you live in the continental United States, a piece of Wyoming helps heat or cool your home, cook your meals, or fuel your car. Wyoming's wildlife, just like wildlife everywhere, is affected by our need for land and energy. Whether or not the grizzly, the black-footed ferret, and who knows how many other species will survive another century in Wyoming depends on management of both wildlife and people. I believe with wisdom we will succeed. And 100 years from now, when my great-grandchildren are camping there, they too will hear the trumpeting of swans in beautiful, wild Wyoming. I'm Marty Stouffer. Until next time, enjoy our wild America. I'm Marty Stouffer. The Dakota Indians called this area Makashicha, meaning a bad land. French trappers called it a bad land to cross. Today, we call it Badlands National Park. From a human perspective, it may indeed be a bad place, dry and desolate, with eroded canyons that form a natural maze of enormous complexity. But for the animals that live here, there's nothing bad about it at all. For them, the Badlands are home. Isolated and protected within the steep canyons, pieces of prairie have been preserved. Each is small, but combined, they form our largest mixed grass prairie ecosystem. Let's meet the animals that live here, in the Badlands. Dawn on the prairie is a particularly active time for wildlife. As the temperature rises, mule deer follow the shadows into the deep, cool canyons. Turkey vultures spread their wings to absorb warmth from the early morning sun. They wait patiently for the thermals that will allow them to survey their domain. South Dakota is home to some of our lushest, most fertile prairie soils. Most of this land has been converted to farms and ranches, but one particularly rugged area has not been settled and is now preserved within Badlands National Park. 244,000 acres are home for a variety of wildlife. It's an enchanted land, scoured and sculpted by water, a fraction of an inch at a time. It was water that deposited these sediments about 30 million years ago. And it is water today which slowly but inevitably carries this sediment back to the sea. Each year, erosion reveals new secrets locked for millennia within the soil. This area contains one of the richest deposits of mammal fossils found anywhere in the world. 30-million-year-old specimens, like this Hyracidon, were followed later by mammoths, camels, and a host of other grazing animals. An equally impressive array of predators, such as this saber-toothed cat, hunted the grazing animals. All of these species became extinct or evolved into new forms, but their fossil bones played an important role in establishing the park and protecting the animals which live here today. Bighorn sheep are well suited to a life on the sheer ridges. fact, most of the time they remain near steep slopes, where safety is only a few bounds away. These Rocky Mountain bighorn were introduced into the park in 1967. The native Audubon bighorn, a slightly different subspecies, were exterminated by early settlers at the turn of the century. Grizzly bears, bison, wolves, and elk all became locally extinct soon after the arrival of hunters and homesteaders. But life was not easy for the settlers either. Cold winters, hot summers, and lack of moisture drove many away. As they left, wildlife began to recover. Many of the species originally present have since recolonized the area or have been reintroduced. Once again, the Badlands belong to wildlife. When our ancestors moved west, prairie dog towns blanketed much of our grassland. One town was said to be 100 miles wide and 250 miles long, containing perhaps 400 million of the plump rodents. When cattle arrived, prairie dogs were viewed as competitors. They were shot, poisoned, and trapped from most of their former range. Towns in this park and in other areas have since recuperated. Prairie dogs play a critical ecological role on the grasslands. Their digging helps aerate the soil, and their burrows provide a year-round refuge for many other small mammals, reptiles, and insects. Trimming the vegetation close to the ground may be a rancher's nightmare, but to the prairie dogs it makes good sense. This strategy ensures a constant supply of fresh green shoots, as well as better visibility of predators. Bison also enjoy the fresh shoots on the prairie dog towns. Unlike cattle, bison and prairie dogs have peacefully coexisted for thousands of years. In the 1800s, hunters reduced the great herds of bison from an estimated 65 million to a mere 1,000. Bison disappeared completely from the Badlands. They were shot primarily for their meat and hides, but their extermination was also part of a larger strategy to eliminate the Indians' food supply and force them onto reservations. A small group of bison was reintroduced into the park in 1963. Today, there are about 500 here, and their future seems secure. By midsummer, the tempo in the bison herd is increasing rapidly. Bulls, which are solitary most of the year, join the cows. This congregation marks the beginning of the rut. Bulls fight for the right to tend a female in estrus. Often, a cow will be pursued by a large group of eager bulls. They may chase her for miles in 100-degree temperatures. It seems like a costly method of reproduction, yet it ensures that the strongest bulls breed most of the cows. By August, the land becomes parched and dry. Small streams and ponds gradually disappear, forcing the animals to move to new areas. Most animals are well adapted to the scorching temperatures and lack of water. This bighorn ram was probably weakened by disease. Nature selects only the healthiest to survive and reproduce. One reason that humans did not remain in this area is the lack of good water. Most of the surface water is muddy and unfit for either drinking or agriculture. One frustrated settler termed it too thick to drink and too thin to plow. It seems to suit the killdeer just fine. Temperatures can exceed 100 degrees for several months, so the few remaining water holes get plenty of visitors. The cool days of autumn are followed by the first snows of winter. By late November, bighorn sheep gather for their rut. Rams join into groups, sizing each other up with ritualized displays. This behavior establishes a dominance hierarchy for breeding privileges. Usually, the older rams in peak physical condition have the largest horns. They can often establish their dominance without having to fight to prove it. The famous head-clashing battles are quite rare, but when two evenly matched rams cannot settle a dispute by display, a fight may follow. Winter in the Badlands is a quiet time. Most animals either migrate or hibernate to avoid the harsh winds and sub-zero temperatures. Rattlesnakes spend the winter in underground communal dens. Many small mammals, reptiles, and insects take advantage of the abandoned prairie dog burrows, which are deep enough beneath the surface to prevent freezing. Several hundred snakes in each den is not uncommon. Only occasionally do they become irritated enough with one another to strike, but the bite is rarely lethal. Carrion beetles also use the snake's den. Exactly why they're here and what they're doing remain a mystery. Luckily for this thirsty beetle, the snakes do not appear to be hungry. There are many lessons hidden within these chiseled canyons. Lessons from the past and lessons for the future. In a time when wildlife is all too often declining, it's comforting to know that given the opportunity and a little help, wildlife can make a comeback. If we can ever learn how to avoid harming these wild creatures in the first place, we will have learned the most important lesson of all. The Badlands are home to an abundant variety of wildlife that's well adapted to life among the steep spires. Equally important is the mixed grass prairie that has been preserved within this rugged landscape. We can all be thankful that there are a few remote places where nature has persisted. Places just like the Badlands. I'm Marty Stouffer. Until next time, enjoy our wild America.
I'm Marty Stouffer, and this is Yellowstone National Park, located in northwest Wyoming. The park's waters vary from near boiling to near freezing, and they support every manner of life, from algae to eagles, from bacteria to bears. This is Yellowstone Lake. With 110 miles of shoreline, it's the largest of its kind at such high altitude, about 8,000 feet. Its deep water is clear and cold, even in summer. My diving crew and I are getting ready to explore this underwater wilderness, a world never seen by the park's 2 million annual visitors. We'll be looking into the life of a creature that is the cornerstone of this entire aquatic ecosystem, the cutthroat trout. It's as intriguing as it is lovely, and its story is more amazing than I ever expected. Our exploration will begin at the southern end of the lake, in the thoroughfare country, the wildest wilderness left outside of Alaska. Join us as we search for the essence of this wild and beautiful place, the brilliant cutthroat.
For 8 months a year, Yellowstone is held in winter's icy embrace. The total number of visitors for the entire month of January is less than the number that come here during one day in July. Man's buildings and boat docks impose on less than 2% of Yellowstone's 2 million acres. This first lady of our national parks was established in 1872, her land and animals protected by government mandate. In her huge lake, there lives the world's largest inland population of cutthroat trout, and they're the reason that we're here. Along with me on the Boston whaler we'll call home are my brother Marshall, who now lives in Dallas but, like me, grew up in Arkansas, and another Arkansan, who's also a lifelong friend, David Huey. One of our 47 national parks, Yellowstone is nestled in the mountains of northwestern Wyoming. Near its center lies Yellowstone Lake, and on the northern shore of the lake, our base, Bridge Bay Marina. We head out of the marina toward the southeast arm and the thoroughfare country beyond. The lake is not only large, it's ancient. Some 600,000 years ago, a volcanic explosion formed portions of the lake basin. Later volcanoes alternated with ice ages to sculpt the landscape that we love so much today. Man the Hunter arrived on the scene some 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, that looks like a good place.
Yeah, I'll go show Marshall. Right here. Today's master hunter along the lake is the bald eagle. This rare predator now finds sanctuary here, one of the few remaining places it nests. Nesting populations, although never large, have remained stable over the past few years. Just to catch even a brief glimpse of a bald eagle, our national bird, fills me with wonder and pride. I'm barely prepared for what's about to happen as Marshall, David, and I discover that we're not alone in our quest for the cutthroat trout. A valiant try, yet no trout this time. In other parts of the country, the eagle's diet may run as high as 95% fish. Here it's only 25%, and of that, only half is cutthroat. It goes in for another try. The pair is occupied with family duties, providing for hungry young eaglets at the nest. We move on. We also want to film the other wildlife that feed on cutthroat and look more closely into the web of life that begins in these rich waters. A smaller cousin of the bald eagle comes here every summer from as far south as Costa Rica to feed its young on the wealth of trout. The osprey. Over 90% of its diet is cutthroat. It specializes in catching the smaller fish. The major predator of adult cutthroat and a most unlikely looking title holder is the white pelican. Because of its ability to catch the larger, mature trout, the pelican competes very little with the osprey, which eats mainly smaller, immature fish. The lake hosts a summer breeding colony of about 500 pelicans, the last one left in Wyoming. Eagle, osprey, pelican. That they can survive here is a living tribute to the management plan of the park and to the importance of the cutthroat trout. As the pelicans return to their nests on the Molly Islands for the night, we find a campsite on shore in Wolf Bay.
Man, this smoke follows me wherever I go.
You know why that is? Even if you're sitting at a campfire by yourself, you know why it seems like it follows you? Because it does.
How's that?
Your body creates heat, radiant heat, creates a spiral in front of you and sucks the smoke in. And even if you move around the campfire, when the smoke seems like it follows you, it does.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
No, I read that.
Heck, I get it.
Sure.
Sure, Marty, sure, uh-huh. Yeah,
That makes sense.
it sort of does.
Watch it, Dave.
This is a wilderness right here. God, I love it.
Beautiful.
Grizzly bears. Right here. Right in our backyard.
Wow.
I'd love to see one.
I know it. You remember all those we saw in Alaska? God, that's great. You know, this is the wildest wilderness there is. This thoroughfare country right here. The southern end of Yellowstone Lake. You know how far it is to a road?
How far?
It's a 2-day hike in any direction. I wish there were grizzlies here like that, but they're just hard to see in Yellowstone.
Remember the first year we came up here, we saw a bunch of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Well, we'll probably see some this trip before it's over.
What's your plan for filming those trout tomorrow?
You gonna do any diving?
Yeah, we might dive tomorrow.
Oh, that'll be exciting.
I know it.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's going to be great. The first thing we want to show is that this lake is backwards.
Is that right?
The big trout, there's only one kind of trout in this whole lake, cutthroat. That's it. The big trout are in the shallow water. Medium trout, and in the deepest water, there's no trout at all, except for little ones.
The little ones are down deep.
That's where the little ones go to hide to get away from the big ones, so they don't get eaten.
Do you know, David, in the warmer waters in the south, the fingerlings stay in the shallow water, you know, in the underbrush?
Yeah.
And the larger ones stay in deeper water on drop-offs, waiting for the smaller fingerlings to stray into the deeper water. Then they eat them, prey on them.
Just backward to this lake, huh?
Yeah, it's probably because there's just only one species or one fish in the lake.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's the cutthroat trout has evolved to protect itself from itself. And what we want to do is we want to show those levels of the lake, and then we want to find the trout, find where they're congregating, and follow them up the spawning streams.
Got a lot of work ahead of us.
It'll be interesting, you know, because the spawning stream. The next morning we head farther south. We'll be diving at the limit of where motorized traffic is allowed. The no motor rule protects the pelicans and other wildlife from undue human disturbance.
Everybody ready? Here we go.
Our destination is Plover Point. Deep in the heart of wilderness, it's the perfect place to begin our search for cutthroat. Yellowstone Lake plunges down to 320 feet and averages about 130. Plover Point is surrounded by several miles of relatively shallow water, only about 40 feet. Adult trout are rarely found deeper than that, and all trout stay within the top 50 feet of the lake. A variety of wildlife lives around Plover Point, including common mergansers. Trout is also a major food item for these diving fish ducks.
This is clear.
This is great. It's deceptively shallow. All right, let's get that diving equipment out. All right, let me see that dry suit. That's first. Okay, you guys get that raft in the water.
Yeah, it is. That's right. Try to go through.
Okay, ready? See this thing in. I hope this water's not as cold as they say it is.
Me too.
Marshall takes off in the raft to set out the warning buoys, while David prepares and checks the diving gear. The pressure change because of high altitude and the frigid temperature of the lake water require extra precautions. I get the dry suit ready. In June, the water is about 50 degrees at the surface, but it gets colder fast just a few feet down. Hypothermia is possible even in summer, thus the dry suit, which retains body heat better than a wetsuit.
All right, zip me up.
Warm? Yes. Claustrophobic? Well, maybe. I hope that feeling won't hit me underwater, but my snug dry suit and face mask and all the dangling gear are telling me otherwise. The diving buoys Marshall is setting out are another precaution. They'll warn passing power boats to steer clear. Other than the dry suit, the gear is pretty standard. A weight belt to sink me down and a buoyancy compensator to get me back up. Those, along with the tank, add up to more than 100 pounds. The mergansers must be amused. For them, diving comes naturally. Of course, the camera also requires protection, a waterproof aluminum housing. That's another 50 pounds. At last. I've dived in the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Mediterranean. Still, I'd rather be right here in Yellowstone Lake with the cutthroat trout. This cold mountain lake is barren by sea level standards. It lacks any large crustaceans like crayfish, but it abounds in smaller members of that same family. Two types of freshwater shrimp are the most common bottom creatures. Keratin from the shells of insects and from these shrimp are responsible in part for turning trout flesh its characteristic red color. Just as trout is a succulent feast for humans, so are these shrimp for the trout. Discounting man, the cutthroat is top predator in this food web. The shrimp, in turn, feed on microscopic organic matter. Low nutrient concentrations and cold temperatures limit the life forms in the lake. But a number of plants have also adapted to survive here. Obsidian sand, boulders, rubble, fine clay, and silt mixed with organic matter make up the bottom. I search for other signs of life and find a freshwater leech. This parasite attaches itself to the trout only for an occasional meal, and so poses little threat. But leech and trout share one distinction: both are native wildlife. Leaving the leech behind, I come upon a strange discovery. In this lake with limited plant life, the balls, as we call them, are fascinating. Some are attached, some not. Some are hollow, others solid like grapes. We later found out that they are nostoc, a blue-green algae which grows only in pristine waters. Each ball is a complete colony of tiny single-celled organisms. On my way back to shore, I come across some long-nosed suckers. Native to Yellowstone River, they were accidentally introduced into the lake. It has not yet been determined whether their presence is harmful or helpful. Suckers may compete with the native cutthroat for the same food, but as bottom feeders, the suckers have filled an empty niche in the Yellowstone system. The smaller red-side shiners were also introduced into the lake from other park waters. Though they have established a firm hold here, their influence on the trout is also not entirely understood. It is known that shiners and young trout eat many of the same things, and, as I'm seeing, that adult trout eat shiners in shallow water. These young trout, or fry, stay in deeper waters. They find food and safety here, far away from the reach of the hungry adult trout, which stay in shallower waters. Soon, many of the adult trout will leave. How they survive a perilous journey from the lake to their spawning areas is the next part of our story. We'll dive in the raging rapids of Yellowstone River as we continue the amazing story of the Cutthroat. I'm Marty Stouffer. Until next time, enjoy our wild America. I'm Marty Stouffer. Little more than a century ago, our Midwest was almost entirely a sea of grass. Hundreds and hundreds of miles of beautiful open prairie produced rich grassland, and the grass supported teeming herds of wildlife. Here our country's pioneers came. Some hurried further west to escape the monotony of the plains, but many stayed to cultivate them. Within a few decades, one of the largest and richest natural ecosystems on Earth was crisscrossed by roads and fences, plowed into the productive fields of today's corn and wheat belt. Our national park system was established to preserve examples of America's original landscape, along with its native plants and animals. Yet there is no national park to represent the vast plains that gave greatness to a young nation. What would it mean, and what would it take to create a prairie park? More than any other animal, the American bison symbolizes the power and magnificence of the plain. It's estimated that as many as 60 million of these shaggy beasts once roamed the open prairie, the greatest spectacle of herd animals ever seen. Yet the bison was only one of many splendid large mammals native to the plains. Wolves and bears stalked antelope and bighorn through the tall grass. The bison was an indispensable source of food, clothing, shelter, and fuel to the Plains Indians. But Indians and bison were obstacles to the settlement of the prairies. In a few short, bloody years, both were pushed aside to make room for the white man's progress. Grassland fit for bison was also fit for cattle. And soil that supported an impressive array of lush wild grasses was great for growing crops. Families hurried west in caravans to break the soil and to stake their claim. By the turn of the century, much of the prairie was fenced and planted. Increasingly complex machinery made it possible to replace more and more native grassland with waving fields of grain. Where bison once roamed like cloud shadows, great combines now march in straight rows. Grass is basic to both prairie and plains, but different grasses growing to different heights create different types of grassland. The tall grass prairie is a sea of saddle-high blue stem, switchgrass, and cordgrass. Farther west, these same grasses grow shorter, and along with others like buffalo grass, create the mixed grass prairie. Still farther west, blue grama and buffalo grass dominate the drier shortgrass prairie. The mixed and shortgrass prairies together are what we call the Great Plains. Fed by up to 40 inches of rain a year, tallgrass prairie once covered 250 million acres. Mixed grass prairie gets higher winds and less precipitation, 14 to 23 inches. Shortgrass prairie, in the dry, rain shadow of the Rockies, averages only 10 inches a year. Each type of prairie is graced by its own special galaxy of wildflowers. 15 to 20 varieties burst into bloom each week between March and October. Grasses may seem dull by comparison, but their leaves and stems are arranged for maximum photosynthetic efficiency. Grasses are also flowering plants, the third largest family of flowering plants in the world. Grass flowers are small and inconspicuous, but close up, they're as pretty as any other kind. Both flowers and seeds provide food. In fact, unlike trees or shrubs, the whole plant is edible. And its way of growing in dense stands provides shelter as well as food for many animals. Many grasses also have an extensive network of fibrous roots that grow sideways as well as down. These roots and runners hold the soil together and enable animals to burrow beneath it. Complex root systems present several advantages to the grass plant and to animals which depend on grass for food. In times of drought, The deepest roots remain in contact with soil moisture, so the plant can survive. The energy stored in grass roots also helps to regenerate the above-ground part of the plant after it has been grazed or destroyed by fire. Another advantage of grasses is that new growth takes place at the base rather than the tip of the leaf. If one cottontail nibbles away the tip, the leaf will continue growing to provide food for another. But the single most important factor in prairie ecology is rainfall. The short-grass prairie, where the antelope play, is green only during spring rains. During the hot summer months, these high plains lie brown and dormant. Fortunately, grass retains its nutritious qualities even when dry. With no trees in sight, the great horned owl builds its nest and raises its young on the ground, sheltered by sagebrush. Wind, as well as rainfall, also controls life on the plains. The pronghorn is not a true antelope, but it evolved on our western plains and is one of the most successful of all prairie creatures. One of the fastest animals on Earth, its speed and keen eyesight are ideal adaptations for avoiding prairie predators. The badger is another highly successful prairie dweller, common to all three types of grassland. This large, feisty member of the weasel family is one of many burrowing creatures at home on the prairie and underneath it. Burrows provide shelter in a treeless land and insulate their inhabitants from extremes of heat and cold. The badger aggressively hunts prairie dogs, pocket gophers, mice, and even rattlesnakes by digging into their burrows after them. If the occupant is away, the badger will dig in and wait for it to return. Badgers are solitary creatures, except during the mating season, when they briefly form pairs. Like all burrowing animals, the badger is important to prairie ecology. Tunneling in general turns over the soil and keeps it aerated, and the badger in particular helps control rodent and reptile populations. It can dig with incredible speed, disappearing completely in a matter of seconds. This western box turtle, on the other hand, is anything but speedy. A badger will eat whatever it can get its long, sharp claws on or into. but the turtle has shut itself in, as invulnerable as a rock. The harder the badger pries with its claws, the tighter the turtle clams up. Perhaps this perplexed predator thinks that the turtle has somehow left its shell and is digging this burrow to wait in until the turtle returns. The loamy prairie soil gets a good loosening up as the badger performs its baffled dance of defeat. Once again, patience decides the outcome. In a similar way, the effort to establish a national prairie park has required great patience, and the course has often been stormy. I love it out here. These wide open spaces where you can see almost forever. Let's look a little closer at the grass. This is buffalo grass. Like most grasses, it has an elaborate root system. The settlers chopped chunks of this out of the earth and stacked it up to build their sod houses. And this one is wheatgrass, named for its seeds. It's an important food. And this is switchgrass. There are dozens of different species of grasses out here on the prairie, but this one is the most important of all. This is big bluestem. It was the dominant grass of the tallgrass prairies. Here's food and shelter all in one plant. It's no wonder that this prairie habitat is the very richest we have in sheer numbers of different species of wildlife. Thousands of square miles of our nation once looked like this. Now there's only a few scattered areas which still do. I think we should preserve what little we have left. After all, we have the greatest national park system in the world. We preserve canyon land, mountain land, forest land, and seashore for the benefit of wildlife
in the enjoyment of millions of humans. Why should we leave out our great heritage of grassland? Much as I love this big sky country and would like to save it intact, I must admit that this whole concept of a prairie park was not my idea. I wish it were, because I think it's great. But many people have been working for years to create a tall grass prairie park in Kansas or Oklahoma. And one man, noted naturalist Dr. Durward Allen, has almost single-handedly spearheaded a plan to preserve 1 million acres of our western Great Plains. 1 million acres sounds like a lot of land. Where could we find a place to put a park that big? Tall, mixed, and short grass prairie once combined to form one vast original prairie. As America grew, the prairie shrank, until now only 2 main areas remain. A Great Plains National Park could be located somewhere in this area. 1 million acres would take up hardly more space than the dot of this question mark. And a Tallgrass Prairie National Park, though much smaller, could find a home somewhere within this area. The ideal way to manage either park would be to leave it in as natural a state as possible. Fire, for instance, has always been a major factor in prairie ecology. Nowadays, controlled fires are set by man to keep grasslands healthy and to prevent the invasion of trees. In times past, prairie wildfires were started by lightning and fanned by wind. They spread fast, burning old dry grass and making way for lush new growth. The effect of man-made fires is much the same today as it was in past centuries, when settlers told of watching immense pillars of fire seething across the plains. Although grasses are much more resistant to fire than animals, surprisingly few creatures are killed by grass fires. Some can fly, some can burrow, and some can run. In the wake of the flames, the prairie looks devastated. But what looks like death is only the prelude to new life. Most of today's prairie is crisscrossed by utility lines, railways, fences, and roads. Some creatures have learned to adapt to these conditions. The deer mouse requires only a small amount of territory, and the kestrel can fly across any boundary. But not all wildlife is so adaptable. Most native prairie animals need to roam wide open spaces on the ground in order to be as free as a bird in the sky. Such spaces are few and far between. A
Great Plains and a Tallgrass Prairie National Park would mean preserving a few natural, self-contained areas of grassland. Creatures large and small, vegetarian and carnivore alike, could exist freely, instead of being hemmed in by fences and highways. These mule deer, as well as their cousins, the whitetails, were once common to prairie and plains. With the help of man, they could be rejoined by other original inhabitants. A prairie park would provide sufficient space for herds of bison and elk, as well as deer, to live in natural harmony with the seasons. Perhaps most important, in a prairie park, the eternal ritual between predator and prey could continue as it has for countless ages. The bobcat seems to treat the prairie chicken more as a toy than as a potential meal. It looks as if the bird is totally at the mercy of the bobcat, but it finally tires of this treatment and flies in the face of its attacker. A million acres of empty grassland. Who needs it, some might say? But it wouldn't be empty. Thousands of kinds of plants and animals would fill it, interacting as they always had. We could preserve not only a slice of history, but a chance for ages and ages of evolution to continue at nature's pace. Such a national park would be a tribute not only to nature, but to man. A unique opportunity to recreate a past we nearly destroyed. Wise men have always had a vision of harmony with nature. Shouldn't it be a wise nation's tribute to itself to establish a prairie park? I'm Marty Stouffer. Until next time, enjoy our wild America.